I am really excited to talk to you about what's been going on in technology. And again, it is good to see you. I hope everybody's doing well in all of this very unusual uh, life we're living right now. Joni has my slides, so I'm just going to wait to make sure that those slides are ready to go. Okay, great. You may see me looking down. I
Dude,
can't
you
read that
muted?
off.
Oops, sorry.
I shouldn't be muted. Can you hear me, Frank?
I can.
Okay. You'll see me looking down. I can't read that off my screen, so I have it printed in front of me. So I apologize if I'm not making eye contact the whole time. I want to just talk a little bit about sort of where our technology department is and what we've been working on and continue to work on and will be working on in the coming weeks or months. I wanted to start by talking about where we were pre-pandemic. Where were we when sort of everything changed? What were we working on? So I highlighted these three very big goals that sort of were guiding our major efforts back in the winter before we left school in March. And those are cybersecurity, disaster recovery, and our one-to-one initiative for students. So cybersecurity, especially back then in the winter, was a very important hot topic. Many districts were grappling with how to make sure they were secure from any outside ransomware or any kind of attacks like that. So to that end, we updated our end user protection software, which you can think of as a regular virus protection antivirus that you might have on your systems at home to keep out malware and any other threats like that. Ours is integrated with our firewall so that if an attack or an attempt was recognized by the system, the firewall could immediately shut down any external traffic into our systems. So we did that, and we purchased and began to implement a data protection appliance that we're kind of still in the middle of doing. And this one, I think the best way for me to describe it is to think of it as two physical pieces of hardware. And they both have to do with backing up data. So the first one, think of as just a constant backup of all the data in our systems. It's live, it's dynamic, it's up to the minute, backing up everything. And then the second one is what we call air-gapped. And so what it is a snapshot of that backup data, but only in a certain period of time. So it connects to the network, takes a snapshot, and disconnects from the network. That's where it gets gapped, air-gapped, so that if something actually ever did get into the network, we would have that snapshot of backup data totally protected because it's not even connected anymore. It's only connected briefly to take that snapshot. And so we're, like I said, in the middle of rolling that bit of security out. And then finally, under cybersecurity, we purchased a software that we were excited to use to do a phishing email campaign in the district. We wanted to really kind of assess where we are in terms of our end users and their susceptibility to clicking, a phishing email or something that was designed to use them as a way to get into our system. We were never able to actually do it because then we went home, and now everything's been a little crazy, and we don't really want to add the one more thing at this moment, but we did purchase that software, and we're ready to do that internal phishing campaign to really give us an idea of where maybe we need to better educate our end users as to what to look for, what not to click, etc. So that was sort of under that big goal of cybersecurity that we were focusing on before the pandemic. We were also focusing on disaster recovery, which kind of was going hand in hand with cybersecurity at the time, something that people were talking about not only in school districts, but even in businesses and all types of industry. That would be, how would we recover our data if we had like a natural disaster? You could think of our backup server room when we had that fire last summer, and how we need to be able to protect our physical equipment as best as possible. So what we did that many businesses and all types of industries have done as well is we contracted with a co-location facility. They call them colos for short, and we found one right in Parsippany. And the facility itself is like very high security, 24/7 monitoring in terms of that security. And it's also, they have the ability to do things we couldn't do. For instance, they have redundant systems, say, of generators and fire protection and air climate control, things that ordinary facilities just couldn't do. And those systems are all monitored 24/7. So your physical equipment is completely protected in many ways. And like I said, with many redundant systems watching over it. We had planned the move to the co-location to be this Monday when we were closed in the district, but we are still verifying and certifying different configurations that have to go from our site, our home site, to the colo. And with everything else that's been going on in the tech department that I'll be getting to later, we just don't feel ready Monday to do that. But it is definitely our goal in the coming weeks in October to get that done. I could give you an example too. When we had that big storm in, I think it was right in the beginning of August, we had that big storm, we had the power outage, and our systems were down for multiple days because there were generator issues that we needed to get the system back up. At a colo, that wouldn't happen because they are prepared themselves with redundant systems of power to be ready for something like that. So we're really excited about the move and looking forward to getting our stuff there and, you know, not risking someone's going to trip over a power cord and pull out a server power and something's going to go down, even if it were for a few minutes. That's not going to happen over there. So we're excited to make that move, and that's coming up soon. And then finally, we were talking a lot about our one-to-one initiative for students. And we were doing that for grades 5 through 12. We currently, as you know, have been doing 9 through 12 for several years now. And we were going to expand that to be 5 through 12. And we based it on what we have been always using, this 4-year replacement cycle. So just as students have the one-to-one from 9 to 12, those 4 years, 5 to 8 was going to be the next set of 4 years before they would get, you know, then a new device. So we were planning that, or meeting with principals and supervisors, and we had determined which devices the principals and supervisors wanted for which grade level of students, and 3 to 12 was Chromebooks, with only 5 to 12 being one-to-one. But the device of choice for 3 to 12 was Chromebooks, and the device of choice for preschool to 2 was iPads, not being one-to-one, but that was all sort of part of this initiative, is to really iron out our devices and know, you know, sort of where we were going so that everybody knew what to expect. And we were ready to do that with one caveat that we always knew about. We weren't going to issue one-to-one devices to 8th grade. Here's why. We were going to do it for 6 and 7, and having all of those Chromebooks that existed in the middle schools now freed up, because 6 and 7 would have their own, there were more than enough Chromebooks for every 8th grader to have a Chromebook every day they were in school. So we were going to keep them there so that they could start a 4-year cycle in 9th grade with a new device that would carry them through, rather than purchase a new device that would get to the end of life before they were graduating high school. So, you know, everything was in order to do that. And that was where we were, like I said, pre-pandemic. So now I'm going to move into what challenges then the pandemic brought to us when we left school in March. So that one-to-one program became a little bit of an issue in a couple of ways. So for one, we had to distribute now to 7th and 9th grade, but the kids weren't in school anymore. And we had to do it in a way that was contactless. We had to do it in a way that was safe. And it basically became like a system of a drive up and verifying that everything that had to be filled out electronically was filled out. And the schools helped a great deal with the tech department to get that done very well. But we had this issue we never had before of loaners. So some of those 7th and 9th graders had loaners from the spring. And so we are still trying to get some of those back. But the actual providing of the devices went very smoothly because a lot of people worked very hard to get that done. The 5th and 6th grade devices, they're still on back order. We have an anticipated date of December. We are, in constant touch with the vendor to try to get them as soon as possible. The principals and supervisors didn't want to put them in fifth grader hands until probably January anyway, but certainly the sixth grade we wanted as soon as possible. But by the time sort of the new budget year came to purchase the devices July 1, they, like everything in technology, by then there was such a wait for all of this equipment. So we're anticipating them in December. You know, I always keep my fingers crossed it'll be before that, but that is what they're telling us. Another challenge for the devices that we had and the demand for devices and the demand for connectivity for students at home. So when the pandemic first started in March, and then I'd say all the way through August, we had these requests. We had summer programs too, so the requests sort of never stopped. But from March to August, we just simply filled every request that came to the department from a principal for either a device or some kind of connection to the internet. And we continued that into September. But by the time we got to around September, I think it might have been the 18th, we had, just in those 18 days of September, over 500 requests for devices. So at that point, we started to talk a little bit more about what are we going to do now? And I will get to that, but I'll leave it there to say March through August, we were filling everything. And then September came and we wanted to still fill them, but we had to have a few more discussions. We also used hotspots to connect families to the internet so that kids could be getting their virtual assignments and doing their meets and everything. So the hotspot is actually like a piece of hardware with corresponding cables or cords, and it'll get a signal, bring down a signal to the home. We learned a lot about hotspots. What seemed to happen a lot was that we had the request and we filled the request, and then the hotspots weren't being used because we could monitor the data. In fact, we had to monitor the data because all the data is pooled. And so the hotspot itself requires a lot of data monitoring, and like, this person used their data, we have to make sure we send them more. And why isn't this person using any of the data? So as we saw these hotspots that weren't being used at all, we of course wanted to collect them back so we could give them to other students who had a connectivity need. That has proven to be very difficult. Principals have tried, the schools have been very diligent in trying to help our department get some of these devices back, but it is proving to be quite a challenge. And if we do get it back, it doesn't always come with the corresponding cords and cables that we sent it out with, so then we have to wait for those supplies to come in order to ever use the hotspot again. So we're learning a lot about hotspots. They are connecting people, but it is a little bit of a heavy lift to sort of maintain. And then the other thing that fell under connectivity was that we knew we would probably need to increase our bandwidth in the district. There was a lot of talk at the time, because we hadn't really done it yet, about synchronous learning and about all the video conferencing and the Google meeting we were going to be doing. So what we did was we sort of ran our own little internal calculation. We found out from Google their algorithm for meets, which demand the most system resources. We found out that algorithm, and we literally set up about 40 Chromebooks in a school, started a bunch of meets with all numbers of participants, multiplied it out across the district, and realized, okay, we do need to upgrade the bandwidth. And so we did. And we didn't do it, we didn't just upgrade the one we had. We actually installed a new one and kept on the old one all the administrative systems, like in the CEC building, the JRW building. And for instruction, we left the new larger bandwidth connection switch. And that's proven to be working very well. We are not reaching capacity, and we are really maximizing how much bandwidth we really want to be using, should be using for the best kind of connection out and within the district. You could go ahead, Joni. Some more challenges. There has been, as you can imagine and understand, an increased demand for tech support. We had already kind of expected this because when we knew we were going to expand the one-to-one, we knew we were going to have more of a demand for tech support. But of course, that all got compounded with all of this. So internally, what we tried to do, and we still continue to do when we can find little pieces of time, is focus ourselves on professionally developing our tech staff to make sure that they're better utilizing the tools they have to help our end users. And honestly, I would say I don't know that you'd call it professional development, but I do feel like we're trying to develop our end users too. We're trying to put out more information to them, instructions, hints, try this, to try to sort of increase their capacity to troubleshoot their own issues so that they get answers more efficiently. So we have been focusing on that, and we will continue to do that. We've also developed some automated responses to common questions. And that doesn't mean that a person just gets a computer. It's not completely automated, but it's more like the tech receiving a help desk ticket would have a bank of responses or a bank of directions that they could say, okay, let me copy and paste this to this person because we get this question all the time. So that's helped in terms of efficiency and turning tickets around. We increased our knowledge base of articles so that they are there posted. If somebody wanted to go and say, let me just find out a little bit more about this tool or this feature, it's there for our users rather than having to put in a help desk ticket to find out more. And we also have a parent page for virtual learning support connected to our family resources on our district webpage. So we are very, very aware of this increased, like I said, demand, very understandably, from now not only our staff and students, but our parents and our community to try to figure all of this out and really want to hear from the experts of technology. So we've been trying a lot of different ways to support all of these different end users. So I had sort of referred to this a little bit earlier when I was talking about, kind of we got to September, we're like, okay, we have a limited supply of devices and we seem to have these two competing needs. So there's this need to facilitate remote learning, but there's also this need for devices to still be in the schools for when the students are in person. Our teachers had made that clear to us that they did feel they needed to make sure that they had the devices in there in the school when they were teaching in person. So we were trying to figure out how we were going to balance all of this, knowing at the time we had those 500, I said in early September, 500 requests for devices. So we had several meetings with Dr. Sargent and principals and brainstormed and how should we go about this. And we came up with a plan to dismantle some more building Chrome carts for students to be using at home, but then also said, let's try a bring your own loaner. So if you were issued a loaner, you could bring it to school so that that's one less Chromebook an in-person student is going to take off a cart. And so then the kids who didn't have the loaners can use the ones on the carts. And that was for all the grades. It says 2 through 6 and 8, not 7, of course, because they have one-to-ones. And for 2, I would just say that seems to be kind of building specific. There are pockets of second graders in the buildings who, for one reason or another, are bringing loaners, but then in maybe some other pockets or schools, they're not bringing them. But 3, 4, and 5 are definitely bringing them in the elementary schools. So this bring your own loaner kind of helped get us to a point where we can still satisfy the in-person tech needs in the buildings. And then finally, there was the challenge of just the normal, how do we facilitate this different type of instruction that they're in school sometimes, but they're home other times? What are we going to do? Well, one simple way we were able to help was we have Genesis, our student information system, roster, communicate with a lot of applications that we use. Reading A to Z is a good example. Genesis will populate the teacher's Reading A to Z class so that just based on the roster in Genesis, it'll populate over to the application so that the teacher's not putting in everybody's name and putting in everybody's email and all that stuff. It does it automatically. We were able to expand that to Google Classroom and Seesaw. So teacher time wasn't taken up with that kind of clerical kind of stuff in the beginning of the year. We also implemented a new remote desktop support that's working very well. So whereas you might have needed to have a tech come to your physical device to look at it and then maybe take it and give you a loaner, we can very easily now remote in to a user's computer and be able to troubleshoot right there and hopefully fix things on the spot. It might be a setting or something like that that we can help fix and troubleshoot right there. That's been really helpful. And then finally, there were some curriculum programs that had like a lab, like a CAD lab. They had software installed on the hardware that a student absolutely needed to do that coursework. Well, we enabled we enabled those applications to be remote. So when the student is not physically there with that hard computer or in that lab, let's say, they can access remotely those same programs they need for that specific curriculum. So we're talking about like CAD, TV production, digital art, stuff like that. Go ahead, Joni. So the remaining issues, not that all the challenges have been solved, they're still ongoing, but some remaining issues are this ongoing remote instruction brings with it some concerns, and we're not unique to this. There are districts all over the country, I would say all over the globe. We hear a lot from Sweden, actually, about the stability of these video conferences, whether it's Google or Zoom or whatever it is. There are issues of audio going in and out, or a meet dropping someone, something like that. So while it's comforting to know it's a global issue, you still don't want it happening. But with all of the users pulling down from these same places for video conferencing, and on top of that, the devices that are being used for it, you know, student devices that are given to students aren't typically the top of the line laptop models. And you see, they're not really made to be doing video conferencing and tabs open for shared docs and another tab maybe for a YouTube video your teacher wants you to watch and another tab. They're not designed to handle that kind of a load. And so when we do have these little blips, it is due to that. It's due to how resource intensive a video conference really is. And that just means it pulls on the system's processor. And the processors in Chromebooks aren't meant to do all of that. So it's a problem that everybody's experiencing. It has nothing to do with our bandwidth. Our bandwidth is in great shape. But again, we're in that same boat as everybody else with some blips here and there in terms of the actual quality of the video conferencing. There is a concern, we know, coming from teachers about the students at home not hearing the students in the room or vice versa. So we do have some equipment out there with teachers to test for us. Because first of all, like I said, all tech equipment is back ordered, it's hard to get, but we certainly don't want to be just purchasing something sight unseen and never trying it out in our district. So we're at that point now that for audio specifically, because that's been a lot of the concern, we are trying some out to hopefully make a purchase to bring some audio assistance into the district. And then finally, the request for devices and the connectivity requests, they keep coming in. And so we are certainly aware of the need to support students, and we want to keep doing that. The hotspot, the connectivity issue gets a little crazy, like I said, because, you know, even if we did get back some hotspots, sometimes we don't have the components with it. So we're looking to finish out using our hotspots and maybe start looking into providing home internet. There are some programs for that available to schools and available to students' families. Certainly, we are committed to supporting the families that are most in need of in our district. That is number one for all of us. So as we move through now, the month of September and go into August, we will continue to have conversations about how best to do that, how best to support our students who are truly in need so that they can stay connected to the instruction in our district. And that pretty much brings me to the end of my presentation, but certainly if Dr. Sargent or any board members have questions,